is Caroline and I'm from Norway, and I'm studying business and economics. I would rather be in Singapore instead of Australia because I think it would look better on my resume. I think a lot of firms are going to move over there to invest in Singapore, and it would be looking like that. I said that I've been studying in Singapore, I know the culture, I know the way they're thinking, and I thought that maybe get me like ahead of other students.
Caroline's ideas are shared with international students across the world, making the intake of international students in Australia a decreasing trend. Group of 8, a coalition of 8 leading Australian universities, considers this concerning.
This sort of decline hasn't ever really happened before.
That's true. They were increasing quite substantially, and then it flattened off in 2009, 10, and then it started dropping from there.
The impact on Australian universities has been significant. In the last year, a further 8% decrease in commencements has meant that revenue from international student fees declined by $2.2 billion in just 1 year, according to the ABS.
Universities in Australia have become dependent on the income from international students to compensate for shortfalls in funding by government, both for teaching but particularly for research. So on average now, about 25% of revenue of universities across the board, and varies from a high of about 45% to a low of about 15.
Yep.
But on average, 25% of the total revenue of universities comes from international student fees. That's very vulnerable for any sector to be so dependent. And the dependency is also double-edged because it's from a relatively small number of source countries, primarily in Asia, and in a narrow range of undergraduate fields, primarily in business.
The decrease in international students coming to Australia partially comes from an increase in countries competing for higher education students.
There's also a major, what we call import replacement effect in some of the source countries themselves. So Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, China, teaching more of their own students, and they're also taking some foreign students.
Yep.
And they're teaching in English. So you've got the countries that have traditionally sent us students are now themselves taking students from other countries. So it's a much more global, competitive environment.
I think it's good to be in Asia, especially when you're studying economics, because there's a lot of developing countries there now. And I definitely think that countries like India, Thailand, and China, and Japan as well will have a lot of impact on the economic world through my lifetime, actually. So I think that it's good to know the culture.
An EDU World Report released in August made recommendations that say instead of just recruiting international students, Australian universities need to internationalise their own students by encouraging them to study overseas. The latest World APEC meeting this September also ended with unanimous agreements of the need to break down tertiary education barriers worldwide to make it easier for students to attend overseas institutions.
It's one-way traffic at the moment. We've got a whole lot of international students come to Australia and very few Australian students study abroad. That's largely because we're pretty much a monolingual country. So that's a real disadvantage. It means that we don't engage as much as we need to engage to understand the cultures of these growing societies and our future trading economies. And if we've got a country that's scared because they don't know and understand these other countries, then that will be a deficit for us for the long term. So it's in our long-term interest.
G08 has already begun two-way student and teacher exchange programs with China.
But the thing is, Australia is located in such special, geographically strategic place. We are, close to Asia, and we have such a substantial business and academic and diplomatic relationship with those Asian countries. So actually, it's very important for us to recognize the importance of linking with the Asian universities and local people.
PhD students of different disciplines are flown to various universities around the world to share research collaboration on pressing issues, with this year's conversation about water management held in Queensland.
All these talent students to talk about their own research and with a very strong cross-disciplinary focus, and to present their their foundings, and they exchange views from different from China and Australian perspectives, and to produce some, maybe later on some joint research, can be undertaken.
But government has a bigger role to play in attracting more international students to Australia as well, according to Mr. Gallagher. Recent criticism in the media suggests we should begin by ending the view of international students as cash cows.
So the clarity of the government's migration policy and its educational objectives becomes important. A welcoming statement by the Australian government at the highest levels to international students is important, because with the boat people and the other things that we do on migration, we give very confusing signals to other parts of the world that we're not welcoming.
If they just more apply to me with like, it will not be that big of a change for you coming here because the culture is kind of similar. Talk to me about the Great Barrier Reef, talk to me about, I think that might have got me to think more about Australia.
Better funding of research would help, in that the incentive would be to attract international students for the purposes of internationalisation of education primarily, not for the purposes of revenue raising primarily. So I think they're important.
Lillian Radilova, International Student Hub.